Hello once again. Christ consciousness and the Cathars. Cathar Love 174. My first the subject of Christ consciousness came up. And I've never really delved deeply into the subject. But because it did come up, I thought I would check it out, and I googled it, and there was quite a range of opinions as to what Christ consciousness was. There certainly wasn't anything around when he was alive. It's a modern expression. But basically, it's people saying travelling towards our higher consciousness, being the best that we can. Others are saying follow in the footsteps of Jesus Christ. Others are saying follow the teachings of Jesus, of Yeshua. His name was Yeshua. I don't know why I don't call him that. If somebody's name is Rose, I think that's what she would like to be known as. So why not pay the person the courtesy of addressing them by the name they were known as in their lifetime? And Yeshua, he was the Nazarene. He was a Nazarite. And the Nazarites were Essenes, and the Essenes were they were Jewish heretics in actual fact. There's nothing about the Essenes in the Bible. There's no reference to them at all. One of the reasons given, as I know it, is because they refused to kill animals, and therefore they didn't sacrifice animals in the temple, which was the Jewish custom at the time. But that was the inner temple. So the Essenes could go to the outer temple, but not to the inner temple. So in any case, they just weren't mentioned. But they're important, and because if regards Christ consciousness and later the Cathars, if going on that follow what Christ taught or asked people to do, then surely that's Christ consciousness. But to that, so one needs to know a little about Christ, Yeshua, and his beliefs. Well, we know that he was Yeshua, Jesus, the Nazarene. We know that Mary Magdalene, Mary of Magdala, she also was her family were Essenes, that they were the Therapeuti Essenes. The Therapeuti Essenes, because the name, as per the name therapeutic, they were very big in medicines, herbs, spices, minerals, to help heal the sick. But the thing that put the Essenes apart from the rest of the Judaic belief systems was that they believed in a universal love. They believed in that one should have love for all of humanity, not just with the rest of the Jews, was Jew for Jew. Everyone else was an enemy. The Essenes says, no, we should love everybody as ourselves. So that set them apart from everybody. They believed everybody was equal, male and female. Even today, the Judaic faith, the major faiths, women are still second class. They don't even have it today. But the Essenes had total equality of the sexes. They also lived in communes, sometimes only a small commune, a couple of families in the towns and the cities, somewhere out in the desert. And they shared that communal living, and they shared. So everybody had the same. So because of this total equality, they were unique in that world at the time, in that they didn't believe in owning slaves. The Jews had slaves, the Romans had slaves, the Greeks had slaves, everybody had slaves. The whole systems depend upon using slaves for their economic system. But the Essenes weren't, because they're into universal love and total equality. So these are the beliefs that Yeshua, Mary of Magdala, these are what they were brought up, and these are what they taught. He also said things like the kingdom of heaven is within, meaning you have to go inwards, meditate, go within yourself, be reflective, be introspective, go in to understand it and discover yourself, and hopefully maybe even have connections with the divine. So the thing about so with regards to Christ consciousness, these are the things that Christ was pushing for, that this is the things that he taught. This was the essence, and in actual fact, this equality, total equality, caring, sharing, communal living, sharing everything, this is all just comes into love. If you have a loving relationship with somebody, this is what you do. You care, you share, you got actions, you're doing this. These are acts of love. So it all just comes down to one word, love, your universal love or unconditional love. This is the Christ consciousness, this is his message, this is what he taught, this is what he wants people to do. He wants people to get together, not to be divisive, this is your political budget. You can have your parties, but you have understanding, you have respect and tolerance and understanding. Try and understand the other person's viewpoint. Because our world's literally splitting asunder, over the last 10 years. So people are going for this, they're going for that, and they have it's okay to have different beliefs, but they're becoming very militaristic, very physical and aggressive with their beliefs. This is not a loving condition, and this is certainly not Christ consciousness. Now the thing about that, these beliefs that the Essene Jews had, heretics, heretical sect, the Essenes, the Nazarenes, the Therapeutae, there were other groups as well. That's the same, identical to the Cathars. The Cathars didn't kill, they were all about love. They were about caring, sharing. They lived in communities. They were both the Essenes and the Cathars. I'm talking about the people who were committed Cathars, the perfecti. They were celibate. With the Essenes, some groups didn't believe in marriage. They used to adopt children for them to grow. They would take kids who were orphans. They'd bring them in and they'd make them part of the group. But the other groups, like the Therapeutae Essenes, they actually believed in marriage. Now, am I making this up about the Essenes? No. If it's not in the Bible, there's no mention of the Bible in the Essenes. How come we know so much about the Essenes? Well, we don't know much about the Essenes, but we do know a certain amount. And the first time we were introduced to it was through Josephus. And this is his book. A very interesting fellow. He lived with the Essenes and for a number of years, as he states. And he was a rabbi. When the Jewish wars came, he became a general. And he realised that there's no way that he was besieged for something like 10 months, but he realised there's no way he could fight the might of Rome. So he surrendered, and then he decided, well, look, why should these people die unnecessarily? Because if you don't surrender, when the Romans took over, they just either crucified you, but they killed you anyway. They got rid of you. So, but he also did an amazing thing. He said to Titus, general, that one day you'll be the emperor of Rome. And he said, no, I can't. He said, I'm not even that bloodline. But it turned out he did become the emperor, and what happened, he remembered that the prophecy of Josephus, and he said, I'm emperor, what would you like? And Josephus says, he said he was a Roman citizen, and as well as a Jew, a rabbi, a general, quite a guy. He said, I just want to retire and write the history of my people, which he did. And so we have the works of Josephus. So I'm going to read now Josephus, and he's going to tell you, because as I read that, you'll understand that this is what I've just said about what the beliefs that the Essenes had, the Jewish Essenes had, and the Cathars. You'll see this come into it as I read this. This is Josephus. There are three philosophical sects amongst the Jews. The followers of the first, of whom are the Pharisees, the second, the Sadducees, and the third sect, who pretend to severe discipline, are the Essenes. These last are Jews by birth, and seem to have a greater affection for one another than the other groups have. The Essenes reject pleasures as evil, but esteem continence and the conquest over our passions to be virtue. They neglect wedlock, but choose out other persons' children, while they are pliable and fit for learning, and esteem them to be of their kindred. They form them according to their own manners. They do not absolutely deny the fitness of marriage and the succession of mankind thereby continued, but they guard against the viscous behaviour of women, and are persuaded that none of them preserve their fidelity to one man. Oh dear, he's a bit of a misogynist, was Josephus. These men are despisers of riches, and are so very communicative as raises our admiration. Nor is there anyone to be found among them who hath more than another, for it is law amongst them that those who come to them must be let what they have to be common to the whole order, insomuch that among them all there is no appearance of poverty or excessive riches, but everybody is positioned intermingled with every other possessions, and so there is, as it were, one patrimony amongst all the brethren. They think that oil is wiped off the body, for they think to be sweaty is a good thing, as they do also to be clothed in white garments. They also have stewards appointed to take care of their common affairs, who every one of them have no separate business for any, but for what is the use of them. They have no certain city, many of them dwell in every city. If one of their sect goes from other places, what they have lies open for them, just as it were their own. I'll stop there, and I'll just go on towards the end. They say that all souls are incorruptible, but that the souls of good men are only removed into other bodies, but that the souls of bad men are subject to eternal punishment. So, to talk about that good souls get resurrected. But the Sadducees are those that compose the second order and take away fate entirely, and suppose that God is not concerned in our doings nor in what is evil. And they say that to act what is good or what is evil is that man's own choice, and that one or the other belongs to everyone, and that they may act as they please. So these are the Sadducees, and he describes them virtually as anarchists. They can do what they like. He said that God doesn't give a damn. But there's the other group, the major group is the Pharisees. Moreover, the Pharisees friendly to one another, and foul at the exercise of concord and regard for the public. But the behaviour of the Sadducees towards one another is at some degree wild. So this is to give you an idea. He's talking about the Essenes, which are share, care, look after each other, loving towards themselves and universally to all others. And he's saying that the Sadducees, he said they're wild. He said they just don't care. He said God doesn't care what they do, whether they do this, whether they kill or murder or do or whatever they happen to be. And then there's the other group, the Pharisees. He said they are far more friendly towards each other. Now, so that's Josephus. So he's just saying about that. But then we have the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now the Dead Sea Scrolls, no one knew what was going to be in it. It took years and years and years before they released it to the public, courtesy of the church. And what the Dead Sea Scrolls were about the Essenes, and it gave even their accounts. Some of the scrolls were their accounts there for daily living and what they ate and what they had in storage and all those different things. But it gave a good idea into how the Essenes lived and how they. So I just there's this, and this is Timothy Lim. He's a professor of Asian studies in England, and he specialises in the Essenes. So this is from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and basically what it does is it simply backs up what Josephus says. But so now today we have quite a good idea about the Essenes, and I'll make a few points that this Timothy Lim, the professor says, the good professor says. The Essenes were a Jewish sect or school of philosophy with two branches. Some were celibate, disdained marriage and adopted children. Others believed that marriage and procreation were needed if the group was to continue and not disappear, their therapeutai. Their community was hierarchical, structured and disciplined. They cared for the elderly and the ill, and they shared their belongings with each other. They studied the holy books of Judaism, notably prophecy, and were punctilious in their observance of Jewish law, especially as regards purity and the Sabbath laws. They wore white linen, renounced pleasure, and regarded continence as a virtue. The Jewish historian Josephus compared them to the Greek Pythagoreans. Most of the Essenes lived life within the Judean society. Philo, he's an historian, described them with the triple definition of piety, love of God, love of virtue, and love of men. So, like other Jews, they relied on God and venerated the lawgiver. But they held beliefs that distinguished them from other Jews. They believed in providence and fate. In other words, they believed in destiny, that we have a purpose here we were born with a purpose. The resurrection of the flesh, reincarnation. The immortality of the soul, that once you're created, you never die. Distinct to all others in the ancient world, they were against slavery, condemning slave ownership as both unjust and ungodly. Slavery was against the law of nature that made all men, all people, equal at birth. So this is Catharism. This is the same. So Catharism is very much their beliefs. You can transpose it, and 2,000 years later, say, if people are talking about, you say they're the Cathars, because there's no difference. All the things that love of humanity, total equality including sexual, communal sharing, no personal ownership, communal caring, they cared for the elderly, did not kill animals, they believed in fate and one's destiny, they didn't eat certain foods, they were celibate, not interested in marriage, all those things. But all those things, if one is really loving towards another, and love is the primary thing, then these things you automatically care and share with people that you love. So in essence, the Essenes were about universal, unconditional love, if you like, and the Cathars were about universal and unconditional love. That was the essence, the primary essence. That was the be-all and end-all of what they were all about. All the other things were subsidiary to that, but were part of being a loving group. Okay, so the question is, how did the Cathars in the 1000s AD have the same beliefs as the Essenes, who were actually prior to Christ, hundreds of years prior to Christ, even further back than that? Well, another thing, so after the crucifixion, lots of Jews, and according to many, the Holy Family, without going into depth into this, travelled to Gaul, to Gaul, which is a conquered Roman area, so there are very few presence, but they came over. And they were Essenes, and they spread the Essene faith. So, but already over there at that time, the people, there were the Visigoths in Gaul, and the Visigoths, as were all the other Goths and the Vandals, which we call the barbarians, and they attacked Rome, they weren't barbarians. They were actually Arian. They were Christian Arians. And the Arians believed, the Arian come from Arius, his belief was that Jesus Christ, Yeshua, was a man like the rest of us and born of just a normal birth of a woman. And of course, it was Constantine and Nicaea that said no. We go along with what Paul said, that Yeshua, Jesus, was the Son of God. So the people who didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God was, well, Yeshua, Jesus himself. He never said it. Mary Magdala never said it. His disciples never said it. The Gospels never said it. It wasn't until Paul had his accident and he's blind for 3 days and had a vision, and he persecuted the Nazarenes and before that, and handed them over to the Roman authorities. And then he had his accident, and he says in his own statement to the judge at his trial that he was blind for 3 days, and during that, when he was blind, he had this vision or hallucination, and well, he had a pretty heavy fall from a horse, and he believed that Yeshua was the Son of God, and he was taken bodily to heaven, and so Christianity, as we know it today, was born from Paul. So the Arians, who didn't believe that, coming from Arius, and that was all over Europe. That was a huge heresy worldwide, and it was only through various battles, war, that the Arians were conquered, and their heresy tended to disappear. But the whole of the south of France, that was the Visigoth area. That was an Arian area. So this belief. Because the Cathars did not believe that they believed, like the Templars, that Jesus, Yeshua, was a normal person like the rest of us, a very special, a spiritual, mystic person, but he was a man like the rest of us, and Mary Magdalene and his mother, they're all normal human beings. This is the Arian philosophy. So that was there. That was the groundswell. So these traditions and these philosophies such as this were already there, and they came together, and because the politics were right, because even though the lords used to fight amongst themselves, all the lords of the Provence and the south of France, as we know today, the one thing they had in common, they hated the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church just grabbed land and so forth. And in fact, people don't realise, but at the height of the Catholic Church in Europe, they owned 3/5 of all the land. In France, it was 2/3 of the land was owned by the Catholic Church. So they weren't exactly liked by everybody. Not people liked their landlord. So this was it, and this became Catharism. Catharism didn't start when the Bogomils came over to the south of France, and this is just the Bogomil bishop. They had their beliefs, very, very similar beliefs, Arian beliefs again. Arius was over there in Bulgaria. They also had the same Arian beliefs that Yeshua, Jesus, wasn't the Son of God, that he was a normal person. So they had so these two beliefs came together, and they coalesced. And they helped bring in organisation and so forth. But the Cathars were there, and and which I wasn't aware of, but there's a Dominican monk, and he said that the Cathars did their own census, and when they did it, they gave the number as 4 million. They actually numbered 4 million. Now that's from a Dominican monk, so he's the enemy. So he's got no reason to lie. Whether he inflates it or deflates it a bit, what's the difference? So that was the million. That was the numbers that he gave, 4 million. So I'm trying to explain through Christ consciousness in the Cathars that this Christ consciousness actually originated from the Essenes. They were Jews, but they were totally different to the normal Jews as we know them, the biblical Jews as we know them. And we know more about them because of when the Dead Sea Scrolls were translated. But I'm just also trying to explain how those beliefs can come, and then they can permeate an area, and within the families and they just became there, and of course with all the other knowledge coming in from the Moors and the Saracens, and they conquered the area, and then there was various dynasties and wars of dynasties also in France, and there was the Crusades. There was all this knowledge coming, and it all came together and all coalesced into Catharism. So Catharism wasn't born or created when the Bogomils came over there. They came over with very similar beliefs, Arian beliefs, that Jesus wasn't the Son of God, so they were Arian as well. So the Arian philosophy, to understand Christ consciousness, you really need to understand as much as one can about the Essenes, because that's where it originated. This is if you want to follow in the steps of Christ, of Yeshua, that's the Essenes. So this, and then the Cathars. So there's no difference in their philosophies. Yeah, the right hand equals the left hand. But it's a fascinating thing, because scholars today still debate about the origins of Catharism and so forth, and they debate Christ consciousness as to what that is. So it's an interesting thing to see that the Essenes, or the idea of Christ consciousness, if you want to look at it as the Essenes, which Yeshua belonged to, Mary Magdala belonged to, that's the same as the Cathars. Exactly the same beliefs. So I'm just trying to bring it all together and just hopefully make it a little bit more cohesive and understandable how these things, one thing affects another. Because we live in a sea of contingency. The contingent means everything, each thing depends on what's happened before. One thing, whatever happens here, is one way or another is going to affect something else, and one way or another that's going to modify or affect something else. Everything is contingent upon everything else. So the Cathar idea of Christ consciousness, as far as the Cathars are concerned, is contingent upon the beliefs of what the Essenes believed. Thank you for listening. Talk again. Bye for now.